All right, our final example today, example 4, solve x squared equals 5x minus 5 by completing the square. So, in order to get the descending order object with the gap equal to the constant, all that has to really happen is move this 5x over to the left. So again, if I'm trying to get you to a comfort level with this, again, my goal is to get x squared x gap equals constant. To make that happen, if I just have x squared already on the left, minus 5x comes over to the left, leave a gap equals my constant, which is already on the right. Again, that's perfectly legal to do that. Alright? So by all means, skip step 1 when you feel comfortable doing it. Get to that comfort level soon because again, it's just really it's an unnecessary step once you're good at this. Step 2 is the completing the square step. Now here's the situation that we just came up to on example 1. We have an odd number in front of x. So rather than writing 25/4, which is what half of 5 squared is, I'm going to write on this side 5/2 squared. On this side, the very next step is to factor, right? And factoring is taking a square root and taking a square root. So to make that 25/4 doesn't really make any sense. Yes, Braden?
Why isn't it negative? Because you're squaring.
When you square anything, it's always plus.
Yeah.
Okay, always plus. So this is always squared, so no matter what sign this is always going to be plus 100% of the time. Alright, so on this side here, my very next step is to take a square root, take a square root, take a sign, right? So making it into 25/4 there doesn't make any sense. But over here I'm going to put plus 25/4. And something I did kind of subtly there, but I want to make sure you saw it, I left myself a little space here. The reason I left some space there is because what I'm about to do is going to take or add some fractions, right? So I need a common denominator. So I'm going to leave some space there to create a common denominator object. So is everybody comfortable with what I did there? Half of 5 is 5/2. 5/2 squared is the magic number. On this side I added 5/2 squared, which equals 25/4. On this side I actually added 25/4. Making this into the actual number 25/4 because I have to actually add these together. Over here all I'm going to do is take a square root. So a perfect square, the sign of the middle term goes here, Braden, that's where the sign matters right there.
Yeah.
It's a minus, so it's a minus. But as far as this is concerned, it's always plus. Alright, and then what goes here is the square root of x squared, square root of 5/2 squared. Okay, so again, that left side, 5/2 squared, the square root is just 5/2, that's simple. Okay, if I wrote 25/4, that's also 5/2, it's still simple, but at least that's a little bit easier to look at. Take the square off. On the right hand side, this is -5, better known as -20/4. Any integer value is over 1 officially, so if I quadruple the bottom, I have to quadruple the top. So if I add those together, -20 plus 25 makes 5/4. So we create the structure we're looking for. Binomial squared equals number. So binomial not squared equals square root of number. Now notice the top is the square root of 5, right? Anybody know off the top of their head what the square root of 5 is? Me neither?
You guess.
2.2 something. I don't know. Alright, square root of 5, but again, leave it as the square root of 5. Alright? The square root of 4 is? 2. Right. When you're looking at a fraction and you're taking the square root of the fraction, you take the square root of the top and the bottom individually. The top doesn't have an exact square root, so leave it. The bottom does, so take it. One thing I'm going to mention right here, never reduce that. This is always going to have a perfect square on the bottom because that's a perfect square, right? So the common denominator is going to be whatever that thing is right now. So never reduce that right there. It's going to be a perfect square every time on the bottom. So you get this nice rational number in the denominator, which is the type of structure we like to have. And as of right now, as long as we have 1x squared, there's nothing weird going on. We haven't seen the next time into this topic where we put a number in front of x squared. These are always going to be the same also. So when I move the 5/2 to the other side, it's -5/2, right? So when I move it across, it becomes positive 5/2. Notice I can make it into one big little fraction there. So they have a common denominator. The -5/2 moves over to positive 5/2. That's being added to the square root of 5/2. Added and subtracted, so 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 goes on top over that common denominator of 2, creating that nice answer that we're looking for.